What's happening, everybody? We welcome you back to another episode of San Diego Prep Insider. Christian Pedersen, joined by Tommy Morris and Bodie DeSilva. Bodie is always joining us on behalf of SBLive Sports, the official digital content provider of all things high school sports. We don't even say the name of the other company. We don't even acknowledge their existence. They suck. They get the scores wrong. They get the stats wrong. We love SBLive Sports. All hail SBLive Sports. Guys, we are 3 weeks into a football season that is starting to seem like there's a couple divisions that are wide open and there's a couple divisions that are already locked up tight in terms of who's going to be the de facto team to beat. So instead of beating the same drum, I just want to kind of talk about players on this edition. Then we'll get, as always, into game previews and predictions, because both of these guys love giving you exact scores and putting together a nice little boxed effort.
I think I nailed the score last week on the wrong side, but I'll count it regardless.
I got one exactly right.
Yeah, it's the Tommy Bodie parlay that for those of you who want to meet them in a back alley somewhere to exchange money for these games. But guys, like I said, let's talk about ballers and players, because wins or losses, records, let's throw that out. Just talk about some of the guys that have been really exceeding and superseding this season in terms of out the gate. We've seen a couple guys like Sir Autry from Hoover, who has almost 1,000 rushing yards this season. We've seen a couple quarterbacks like Julian Satan have great starts to the year. We've seen a couple defenses where guys are already getting interceptions. So I'm just curious. We'll start with you, Bodie DeSilva, from Scorebook Live. All hail SBLive Sports and their fearless leaders. But any players that kind of meet that threshold for you this season that you're like, hey, game ball to that guy for 3 weeks of play?
Yeah, for me, I was looking for guys that are playing multi sides of the ball, whether it's special teams, big contributor, whether it's a defender, something like that. And I got to see this on Saturday. Too many honorable games this week, so I'm trying to remember what days. But Kevin Allen from Helix, a guy who had a really good year as a junior, just under 1,000 rushing yards, has started with another huge year, 365 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns so far. But I think what's impressive when I watch him, he can come off the edge. He had a huge sack the other day, recovered a fumble for a touchdown in the end zone. That's a guy that just, it feels like you're never going to take him off the field, always ready to work. And I think it's a big reason for why Helix has started 3-0 and continues to keep rising. I know they got another big one this week.
So, Bodie, you mentioned going offensive and defensive side. Is this something that you're seeing across the board at a couple other spots? Because you've also stopped in at Carlsbad this year. You've seen Madison. You've seen a couple of the higher echelon teams.
Yeah, I don't think it's too widespread at this point, at least among Division I, Division II.
You're giving Kevin Allen the standout award through 3 games as the best two-way player in the county right now.
Yeah, I think that would be fair to say.
I love it. Tommy Morris, for you, any guys that you want to highlight or just game balls from last week? Any players you want to shout out through 3 weeks?
Yeah, I've got some game balls for last week. I got to mention, because we messed this up. I messed this up. This was my worst call of the week, was Palo Verde and Grossmont. So I got to give a shout out to Palo Verde, especially Wanyel Fernandez. 182 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. My fault, guys. I was wrong. Talk about guys who have big junior years coming into their senior year. How about Chris Brown from here at Mesa? He had 152 receiving yards and a touchdown. Tyson Lyon to Chris Brown is going to be a combination we're going to hear throughout the rest of the season. Those are 2 very, very good football players on the same team. I'm going to give a shout out to a whole entire unit, if I could, just the whole Ramona offensive line. Last week, 316 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. That is incredible. And then we mentioned 2A guys. How about Kellen Morton, Claremont? 2 interceptions for touchdowns against Viewpoint out of Calabasas. He also had 5 extra points. So picks the ball off, scores it, then goes and lines up and kicks field goal. So big game for Kellen Morton. Big game for Claremont. First victory for their head coach. So shout out to the G-Tons.
Yeah, a couple of the shout outs that I wanted to get to. Charlie Hutchison from Mission Bay has had a fantastic start to the year. Any quarterback with those numbers gets this shout out, but a quarterback that has not played varsity high school football up until this point in his high school career gets that shout out, especially Achilles Smith Jr. at Lincoln has looked fantastic. The Lincoln defense has also looked really strong. So, not saying that like an Oregon commit at quarterback is the exact same as a Georgia commit at running back, but it does seem largely that there is no drop off on the Lincoln offense, despite them, shifting from their primary notable piece being a quarterback instead of a running back. Let's see. Jalen Goldman is having a pretty decent year to start with Santana. We're going to talk about the Sultans a little bit later. this game. Matthew Barton, the quarterback for Mount Miguel, want to give a little bit of love to him. Jalen Brown with Madison. Bodie, you saw Jalen Brown, yes, in person with Madison at the Honor Bowl this weekend. Can you tell?
Correct. Yeah, that was a tough one for Madison. They for much of the game, it just didn't look like they could get it to the end zone, and then they finally got a stop at the end. They're down 8. They pull out a trick play, a wide receiver pass goes 55 yards, I believe. Under a minute left. They need the 2-point conversion, and Oak Ridge from the Sac Joaquin section stood up and got the stop they needed and ran out the clock. So all those Honor Bowl games were really competitive. Obviously, San Diego section being involved in 4 of the 5. That Centennial Punahou game, I know no San Diego connection there, but that's one of the probably 10 best high school games I've ever seen coming down to the end. And great to see a team from Hawaii almost fill up the entire opposing section there at Cathedral Catholic. The one other name I want to mention here, Dominic Silva from Valhalla, I think has gone a little bit under the radar.
That was the last shout out that I had. Oh, that's wonderful. That's delightful. Good for you beating me on the Valhalla one. I thought I had some Northern love there.
Yeah, I think the thing that's most notable there, in 9 games last year, he ran for 786 yards. In 3 games this year, he's already at 710, 11 touchdowns, 236 yards per game, over 9 yards per carry. So really just impressive all around for a Valhalla team that's off to a 2-1 start.
I apologize for that reaction, Bodie, being directed at you, but I thought Valhalla was going to be a nice little off the board pick there, but apparently the mainstream media has already picked up on the Valhalla narrative. Tommy, before we get on to the games that we're going to discuss, we got to know, what is the play of the week as our
triple option
coach?
Triple option. Can
you please educate people on the proper way to run the triple option?
You got to make the read on the fullback dive, and then you go to the outside, find an overhang defender, make a read on that.
And so what you're saying,
defensive end, depending on if it's tight end, how we're blocking it.
And for La Jolla, it's Jackson. Just read through all of those and take it yourself. Yes.
No, this play hasn't been run since 1997, so I don't think. No. Yeah.
Should we call up Lucas Johnson from Mount Carmel notoriety for his?
Yeah, there you go. The Georgia Tech offense.
Go to Georgia Tech and see if that works. All right, guys, let's talk about some games coming up this week. We got a bunch of great games, and if you want to check out any and all of the scores and follow along with all of those, make sure you download the SBLive Sports app so you can stay up to date constantly. We're going to pick a couple of them to talk about. The first one is Santana at Fallbrook. Both of these teams seem very strong so far, but 3 to 4 games sometimes doesn't equal a real actual sample size. So this is starting to feel like some of the real heat check type moments for some of these different teams. Tommy Morris, let's start with you and your thoughts on Santana and Fallbrook.
Yeah, so Santana, Fallbrook, interesting game. Fallbrook challenged themselves last week against Great Oak. That's a tough team out of the southern section. So it didn't go well, but it's a good game experience, I think, for Fallbrook. Chris Bosch, we talked about him a lot last year. He's still great this year, 138.7 rushing yards per game. Santana, I know you mentioned Jaden Goldman for Santana, but they also use Alex Rico. They've used both of them. They both look good. Rico, a little more athletic. Jaden Goldman is just a very large human being, especially for being a sophomore, if I read the roster correctly. And he's got a big cannon for an arm. So 2 effective quarterbacks. I know when you hear, 2 quarterbacks must mean 0. No, they have 2 good quarterbacks who can both play at any point during the game. I like Fallbrook in this one just because strength of schedule, I think, benefits them a little bit, having gone through that experience last week, but it will be a good game.
Bodie DeSilva from SBLive Sports, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think this is really, really even. Looking ahead, Santana, I would like to think they'll be focused on and looking at this game only because they do have El Cap, Granite, Helix, all these games coming up down the road here. But I'm going to go with Santana. I think they go on the road. And they pull out a 28-25 victory. We'll go with the rare 25.
25.
Now you know Bodie's just angling for some.
I'm thinking 3 touchdowns, 2 safeties.
Perfect.
Next game we've got is Helix at Madison in something that is like the beginning of a couple of dominoes to fall in terms of Madison has to play Helix and Cathedral. So someone in that Western League is going to take an L. Helix has to play Granite and Madison. So someone in that, this is how we start to figure out who's going to actually make open division as opposed to just talking about who we think is a good football team. So starting with you, Bodie DeSilva, I'm curious your thoughts on 2 teams that you got to see this last week playing the Honor Bowl.
Yeah, I think it can kind of be deceiving just because you take one that you saw win, one that you saw lose. Both were very close games there. I think at this point in the year, I have more confidence in Helix and their weapons offensively to move the ball. Although I think Madison's strength is also that defense. They've got top players really at every level. I trust that D line to come after him. You've got one of the best linebackers around in James Tavayo. And then you've got Arizona State commit Martell Hughes, who I saw was playing some offense as well last week. So I like Helix. I like their ability to pass with Rylan Jesse and then Kevin Allen, who we talked about. So I think Helix's offense gets them another win here.
Tommy Morris, your thoughts on Helix and Madison tangling this week?
Yeah, let me give a shout out. We talked about two-way players. How about Jackson Daniels, who has 2 touchdowns as a receiver, 2 interceptions on defense. Madison's defense that's for Helix. Excuse me. Going back to Madison, though, like Bodie said, James Tavayo is one of the best linebackers I've seen in quite some time. He seems to be all over the field when you watch, especially watch that Oak Ridge game from last week. He is tough to block, and he has a good nose for the football, especially in the run game when he's coming up for run support. I do like Helix, though. I think their offense is just a little more dynamic. I think this is a low-scoring one. I think it'll be like 17-14, but I like Helix in this game.
Next game we've got down in the South Bay, Bonita Vista heading to take on Hilltop. Bodie DeSilva, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think in this one, I'm just going to lean Bonita at least early on, as I'm trying to pull up several other things here, and I shouldn't. They got their early trip. They went to Hawaii. That's their one loss at this point. But I think otherwise that defense has looked really good. The 2 other games they've won 12 points, 7 points. I think much like Tommy thought in the last one, I think this is a low scoring one. I'm going to go Bonita 20-10 here.
I'll be very curious. A 3-1 Bonita Vista with obviously still some tests later in the season with having to play Mater Dei and Eastlake, but this could be a squad that I think a lot of people had pegged as 5-5, maybe a game or 2 in either direction. Like, this could be an 8-2 Bonita Vista team when all is said and done, the way the rest of this schedule is shaking out. This could be the biggest surprise of the season. Tommy, I'm curious your thoughts on this game.
I think this will be a close one, too, just like Bodie thinks. I have the same kind of notes. Bonita Vista giving up 19 points in 2 San Diego section games. That's 9.5 points. Pretty easy to win when you have less than 10 points a game. But for Hilltop, Isaac Nones, we haven't talked about him, I don't think, ever yet, but having a good start to his senior season, 200 passing yards and 59 rushing yards per game. He also has 8 touchdowns he's responsible for, 6 through the air, 2 on the ground. So Hilltop is pretty good offensively. I do like Bonita Vista, much like Bodie does, and I do think this one's going to be low scoring also. And I'm saying like low scoring. I'm like 14-10 type low scoring, but I like the Bears.
Not going to take 8-5 or something like that to try and out.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, actually, I'll go 15-11.
I think the one note to add there with Bonita, and if they can get to 5-6 wins, they have not won more than 5 games since the 2015 season when they went 12-3, won a CIF title. So
yeah, no, that's what that
seems like they're moving in the right direction.
I was not trying to hit Bonita Vista with a stray here in the middle of a take. It
definitely feels like they're on the up.
There is one particular coach who I'm not going to go full Portnoy and betray my DMs here. But I'll say there was one coach watching who I can pull up the direct quote, but it's something to the effect of Bonita gonna be booty hole this year. That they're 2 wins in, and I'm looking at the rest of the schedule, and some of the other teams on their schedule are not overperforming early in the season. It looks like I feel like I'm not crazy saying that this could be a 7 or 8 win Bonita team. That is the biggest shock of how any team performed at the end of the year, based just solely off how we kind of thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year. Last game we got is Hoover and Classical Academy. Both of these teams sitting at 2-1. Again, this feels like a heat check. 3-1 is a lot better a spot to be at than 2-2. So Tommy, your thoughts on Hoover and Classical Academy?
Yeah, Classical with a big win against Morris. I know, Morris not maybe what they were last year, but for Classical, going a smaller school going up against a big public school and winning is a big deal. I think Justice Smith, who kind of has come out of nowhere, 138 rushing yards per game and 4 touchdowns so far in the first 3 games. He's a thick dude who's hard to tackle, and I think he has another big game here. But we talked about him a little bit at the top of the show. Sir Autry is ridiculous. He has almost 200 rushing yards per game. He has 9 touchdowns in 3 games. Had an explosive game against Maranatha last week. I think Hoover, just because Sir Autry's going to be the best player on the field, and whenever in my head it's equal, I go with who's got the best dude. I think quite a few touchdowns this one too. I'm going to go 28-22. Just to be a little less boring than 28-21, but 28-22, I like Hoover in this one.
This is turning out to be the most exotic parlay that has ever happened in show history. Bodie DeSilva, your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I'm leaning Hoover here as well. I think the interesting note there for a Hoover team that's averaging 35 points per game is they've yet to score in the third quarter this year. So I think that's something where maybe they just need to figure out coming out from the jump in the second half.
They got to make sure that they're not receiving the kickoff, so they get an extra possession.
Now in two of these, both road games, they've both been blowouts. So maybe it's a different group of guys that are coming on the field immediately there. But their one home game was also a loss. So I think
that Hoover, second string Hoover offense, Bodie's calling you out.
To go with how it's been for Hoover, they're 2-0 on the road. They're on the road again, so I will stick with Hoover here. I'm going to go 31-23.
The rare team where you favor them more on the road than at home.
They enjoy the bus trip. There's just more camaraderie.
What does that say about the Hoover student section at home? Not giving them adequate amounts of love at that.
The one home game was the Thursday, so there's the excuse there.
There you go. That wasn't a home anything. That was just your team you don't like to play them on.
They played every day of the week then, right? Because didn't they play Saturday? If they played Saturday, Friday, and Thursday, I think they have.
Yep. They've completed the box already.
need to see how they play on all the other days of the week, just to make sure that Thursday is the one that they lose on, so they can avoid it. So look out for Hoover playing Monday and Tuesday games, just to try and freshen things up a little bit. Anything else that we need to get to for this week in high school sports, guys?
You joke, but I think we did have a Monday game this year. I can't remember who it was, but I'm pretty sure we did.
There was, a couple of years ago, Saints and Madison finished a game on a Monday. Was that the Lightning?
Yeah,
that might have been the Lightning year.
Wasn't
that? That was a crazy,
where every conference had their own rules and some declared no contest and some, that was.
I'd forgotten about.
I don't recall social media being too kind about how every school chose to handle it. We were winning it after the first quarter. We would have won that game.
Stop the count. Back when that was not an overly mean statement to say towards anybody or anything. But Tommy, I think there was, you're right. I think there was a Monday game out the gate on one of those overly packed.
I feel like it was one of those ones during the quote unquote hurricane where they just moved it, but I'm struggling to find it. So maybe I'm just crazy.
No, you are. If anybody is crazy in this show, it is me and my mixing and matching of games and schools. It is not you guys. My analysts are the sanest, most rational people around. We will have Tommy leave this one on a cliffhanger, and he'll fill in everyone on the results of that Monday game next time.
I can't find it. I'm looking for it now. I can't find it. So maybe I'm insane.
As always, keep it tuned though with SBLive Sports. You can download the app, or you can visit highschool.si.com to check out all of their stuff. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys soon.